My name is David Needham. I'm a developer advocate at Pantheon. I like to say that I sort of sit between the developers that are outside of Pantheon and in the community. Spend time creating curriculum and training workshops for them. And then I take everything that I learn in the community and take it back to the developers inside of Pantheon who are creating new functionality and new options, and make sure that we're creating features that are relevant.
Okay, cool. Can you tell me about your background with WordPress and Drupal and other technologies?
Sure. So I started the presentation today telling the story about how I first got into Drupal. Basically, I was in a advanced web design course at college and was basically tasked with creating my own CMS from scratch. So PHP and MySQL and going through and doing all of that. And the instructor gave, it was a great lesson because he ended that section by saying, okay, now that you all know why you should never build your own CMS, we're going to spend the rest of the time in the class learning about other CMSs and what the professionals use. So we could pick whatever CMS we wanted, and we basically built a website for the same fake company. So literally everyone else chose WordPress because it was a very obvious and easy choice. But my instructor encouraged me to pick Drupal. He offered to mentor me and help me get over the bumps in the road and really learn Drupal well. And so that led to me eventually becoming a Drupal developer and speaking at my first camp.
Okay. So are there certain types of websites that you prefer to build on one platform or another? For example, blogs or business publishing?
That's a great question. During the presentation, someone at the end asked if how people in the Drupal community see WordPress as CMS. And I tried to explain that, historically, WordPress sort of had the stigma or the whatever, that it was mostly a blogging platform, that if you want a blog or a simple website, you could use WordPress. If you want anything else, use Drupal or another system. But I don't think that's true anymore. I think it comes more down to what you feel comfortable with, and there's still a little bit of the what you're going to be using the website for. I think Drupal is wonderful for big data. Out of the box, Drupal has great structured content in a way that is, I think, a little different than what WordPress does. So it's great for migrating content from all sorts of places, keeping the individual fields very separate and distinct. And then, since it's separate, you could use it for decoupled websites or mobile apps or Facebook applications or kind of anything, because you can call the individual pieces of content very easily. So kind of similar to what WordPress is doing with REST API right now. Drupal's been doing it for a little bit longer, so I feel like it's a little bit more mature in that area. But if you know WordPress, if you are comfortable with it, it's a little bit harder to make the case that you should use one versus the other, because you'll probably end up with a better website in the tool that you're comfortable with.
Okay, so I visited your blog last night, and it looks like you chose WordPress for that. Why did you end up with WordPress then?
So when I first started working at Pantheon about a year and a half ago, I had built a few WordPress websites, relatively simple websites, and actually my first website was a WordPress blog. And I had been journaling. I went to WordCamp US in Philadelphia and went to a lightning talk and was feeling like I really need to blog. Journaling privately wasn't really working for me, and I thought, okay, well, I need to get a little bit more familiar with what WordPress is doing today. So I created a website and started using WordPress to blog. So it was mostly just a way for me to get my blog posts out there and to really experiment and feel like I knew what I was doing with WordPress.
Okay. How would you characterize the Drupal community and the larger community and the development community?
Well, it's a pretty broad question, but I think, generally speaking, the Drupal community is very technical. As of Drupal 8 a couple years ago, it's built in the Symfony framework. So in order to really contribute to core, to write modules, to get into the code, you have to understand what it's doing. And so you have to understand object-oriented programming, which has traditionally it would be something that you would learn in college or in formal classroom settings. So as a result, Drupal is a little bit harder for people to just pick up and start hacking on right away. Not completely, but generally speaking, I think it's a much more technical community in that regard, because you have to know more about the object-oriented programming. And in general, the entire editor experience in Drupal is customizable. And so this is good because you're able to control and support the editor experience and workflow that works best for the people that are creating the content. But it also means if you don't have a user experience person, a design person, someone who's deliberately thinking about the workflow and the process that the editor is going to go through, you might end up with a very rigid and ugly Drupal website experience. So you have to have probably a team and a little bit more of a background in Drupal in order to build a good Drupal website, I think.
Okay. During your presentation, you encouraged WordCampers to attend a Drupal event nearby them. What can the WordPress community learn from the Drupal community?
Yeah, well, there's a lot. I explained in the presentation that visiting other technology and another open source community's events is a little bit like visiting a different country, where your eyes are open to new possibilities. Your perspective gets shifted in a way because people in other places do things differently than you do and do things in a way that you're unfamiliar with. So even if there are plenty of ways that people in the WordPress community can contribute to Drupal and vice versa, but even just going to see what's exciting to the Drupal community right now, what's exciting to even Joomla or other open source communities right now, and using that to kind of spur on more new development in WordPress. I know in particular, I believe it was, I don't remember her name, but Heather maybe was mentioning some privacy collaboration, taking things that have happened in the WordPress community and trying to work with other communities like the Drupal community to have a sort of standard privacy plan in place and system that I think responsible CMSs should have. So certainly that's one area where we're already in progress of doing that. But then there's all sorts of other interesting things, like, Gutenberg as a tool for building pages is, and the editor experience is unlike anything I've seen before, and it has been inspiring to the Drupal community and other communities too. So there's been active development in alternative options or doing things in a little bit more like the Gutenberg fashion than the way that we have it now. So it's really hard to say, but if you go to a Drupal or other community event and you see something that's interesting to you, or see something you have a voice, something that's passion that brings you to that joy, then just contribute, just share your voice, submit to speak like I did here at a WordPress event.
So do you see a future where people from both communities could collaborate on shared tools that could actually be used across both CMSs?
Potentially. I wouldn't limit it to just Drupal and WordPress, though. I think in general, we're all based in PHP, we're with MySQL databases, and for the most part, our communities are very, very similar with very similar goals and open source collaboration, the open internet. So I think we share a lot more than we think, than we realize initially. I wouldn't be surprised if there are opportunities like Gutenberg and the privacy project and other things like that we could work together on.
Okay. So what does it feel like as a newcomer at an event where you're experiencing another open source community? What kind of tips would you give a person who's walking into an event where they, for the first time, are meeting all of these new people and looking at what sessions should I attend? Where should they start?
It's a great question. It's really difficult to say. It depends a little bit maybe on what they want to get out of it. But I've been coming to WordPress events now for a couple of years. And it's always helpful to, of course, come with an open mind. Don't be the sort of person that comes in kind of trying to push your agenda. Come in, listen see what is exciting to the people that are there. Of course, if you want to learn how to get started, start with beginner topics, but I think it'd be pretty interesting to hop into some even advanced topics if that's the sort of thing you're interested in. Just, again, to see what other people are doing with the technology.
Okay. My last question, do you think CMS rivalries still exist, or is it mostly just all this stuff with jokes now?
There probably are still rivalries, but it's probably not as big of a deal as how it used to be. And I think part of it is because we're realizing that we're really not competing. The internet is a big market, a big place, and there's plenty of room for all of our communities to work together, especially since our values are so closely aligned already. So if there is a rivalry, and I guess there probably is, it feels a little bit more like a friendly sibling rivalry than anything.